with one of, I would say, Animals Amplified's longest supporters. Like, you got in there right at the beginning. Janine, and Janine is actually a primary lead zoologist. We were just talking about it. The long title. She's a primary of an area, and she's also a lead zoologist at a really awesome facility. And I'm excited to hear from you today.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk to you today. We haven't talked in a while.
So. I know it's been too long, and It's been way too long since I saw you in person. My thing that I did not know about Janine until I met her in real life is she gives the most amazing hugs.
I know. Yes, and you're short.
Yes.
I didn't know that either.
It's perfect. And I can just be enveloped in Janine. It's lovely. Anyway, so tell me, let's start out. We have to start out all of these just by kind of giving us a background of how you got into the industry and what different kinds of facilities you've worked at.
I laugh because I've worked at them all. Any type of facility you can think of, I've probably worked at it. So I've worked at an aquarium and done shows. I've worked in research. I've worked in a theme park. I've worked in a zoo. So I've kind of hit every facility, which kind of gives me a unique perspective on animal care and, you know, where animal care goes and comes from. And it's fun for interns when they ask me questions about my career, because I'm like, well, I'm not your typical keeper. So I started in high school back in the Stone Age, and had to do community service for high school and knew I always wanted to work with animals. So started at my local aquarium and volunteered. They had a program for high school students where we got a part-time job and a paid one, and also volunteered. I know it was huge, big money. And we got a raise because we got paid minimum wage, and then minimum wage went up. So that was my first paid job and first raise ever.
Wow.
I know. And volunteered at the same time. So I learned all about marine science. They had a 12-week course. It was 8 hours every Saturday for 12 weeks. And I was hooked, you know, from there. And we went out, did education and interpretation. And from that, I thought I wanted to be an aquarist. I just wanted to work with fish. Never thought anything about, they had dolphins and seals, and I was like, yeah, they're cool. You know, like, whatever. You know, that's for those dolphin people, you know, that didn't strike me as fun. And when you're an adult volunteer, like a lot of places, you can volunteer in the different areas. And I had wanted to volunteer as an aide with the aquarists because that was my career goal. And there weren't any openings. And I waited and I waited and I waited, and I kept interpreting and volunteering and saying yes to everything. So I dressed up as the mascot. I walked in parades. I, you know, went to all the different events, helped host parties. And finally, the head of the volunteers was like, why don't you join the Marine Animal Rescue Program? That way, at least you can meet and mingle with other people. I was like, okay. Like, I mean, well, the program was housed in the building that fish quarantine was in. So I was like, all right, this is, so sounds like a good idea because I still want to work with fish.
Yeah.
And I was like, all right. And start to work with mammals, and then the next thing I know, I'm volunteering with the dolphins. And so I became a marine mammal trainer and did that for quite some time, and worked with marine mammals there. That was my first paid job. So you'll notice I never interned. I was never an intern in my career. I volunteered. I definitely put in unpaid hours, but I never interned in my career. I was really, really lucky. And so not that I never did projects. All you interns out there, I definitely did my share of projects. I definitely did my share of eating ramen and having lots of roommates, because I left my hometown and went to school in California. So I also got my first paid training job before I finished my college degree. So I kind of did things backwards. It was weird. Moved to California to finish my degree and went to a school. I went to UC Santa Cruz, and they have marine mammal labs. So they research on wild marine mammals, as well as having a couple labs that have marine mammals on grounds. And I worked at one of them, and also unpaid. So I was still volunteering, and did cooperative research with seals, sea lions, and sea otters. And so learned a lot about hearing. So we did acoustic research, as well as maintained past projects, because our animals still knew them. So did a lot of fun stuff there. So learned all about research and how to train for that. Left there and worked with terrestrial animals for a while at a theme park. And that was interesting because theme parks are good at theme park. And sometimes the animals are also part of the decorations. And we had to desense our animals to things like bells. And when our theming people would decorate, sometimes they put things like giant pumpkins and trees too close to our fences, and then they became food. So even though, you know, we would tell people that those are snacks, you know, they're like, but they're not. And you're like, but they are. And then they would disappear, and who knew? So it was a lot of fun. It was just, you know, kind of a different pace and different people to kind of deal with. And then from there, I went to another zoo, but it held marine mammals as well as terrestrial animals. And so that was a whole other party, going from a theme park to a zoo. And then I am now at another zoo in another part of the country, which was a huge weather change. I went from dry and at altitude to I am now in Texas. Yeah, I came to Texas in the middle of what has been the hottest summer and now the wettest month on
record.
On record. And
After you made
everyone keeps saying,
after you survived a really bad drought.
Yeah. I keep getting told it's not always like this, which was the
You're
same
like,
thing.
sure.
So
That's awesome. So kind of tell me how long were you at each of those? Well, I mean, obviously you were at the research facility throughout college. So how long were you at the theme park, and how long were you at the other zoo?
So I was at the aquarium for a total of 10 years. I started when I was 15 and was there until, you know, I was 25. And then the theme park, I was only there for about 1.5 to 2 years. It was what they call a seasonal position. So you would work for about 10 months and then you would have 2 months off. And we could pick, because we were permanent seasonal, so you could pick which months you wanted. It wasn't always the best working environment. And having had other experience under my belt, it was one of those, this isn't an ideal working environment from both the scheduling standpoint and the people standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't something I wanted for myself. I kind of wanted a little bit more. I was also at a point that I'm like, if this is how it's going to be, maybe I look into something else. I considered going back to school at that point. I'm married, and so there was 2 of us to consider. And so career-wise, I had made him move a couple times, and I was like, well, we can stay in this area. It was a good area. I was closer to home. It was the closest I had lived to my family in a long time. So I considered leaving the field, and a good friend of mine basically refused me and said, no, that's not going to happen. So she basically made me come work with her.
The rest is history.
Yeah, and the rest is history. Or work with her again. So the zoo after that, I was there for about 8 years.
Awesome.
Yeah, it's a long time.
So, and I know you haven't been at your new zoo. Is it even a full year yet?
I think it's 6 months.
Okay.
It's been 6
Yeah.
months.
So a fresh change.
Yes.
So tell me, like, you've had a lot of positions, so I'm sure you've had some leadership roles and some keeper roles. Can you talk to me a little bit about like what's the difference you see in those roles? Like, is it just the normal progression? You get into the industry, the more experience you have, you move into a leadership role, you're in the leadership role, and then you know, become curator and director and whatever. And that's just the progression, like same skill set, same requirements. I'm baiting you, but
Yeah. Yeah, most of the places it's just kind of learning the lay of the land, you know, and how each place operates, because it's very different. Working at the theme park, they had many locations, so they moved people around between the parks a lot. So it was harder to do the upward progression because it wasn't entirely upward. You would think, say you had a shot at the next level, and then all of a sudden somebody came in sideways from another park, and you're like, wait a minute, what? And you're like, I thought, yeah, I was doing everything right. And then all of a sudden you're like, wait, who is this person? And you're like, where did they come from? Or like all of a sudden they're like, oh, this is, you thought, oh, this person's going to be the next curator. And then here comes some curator from, from who knows where, who knows nothing about our park because they've been working in another state for 12 years. They've been working their way up, but in order to get the next promotion, they have to move to our park. And you're like, well, you don't know anything about us. Like, you don't know how we operate. You don't know how, weather affects your seasons affect your school, like everything that affects your location. And, because your facility is going to operate completely differently from my facility. I mean, even if another one in your state operates completely different because you're in your own little ecosystem, with how your guests are. Sure. So, I mean, that's hard, but for the most part, I mean, it's been pretty linear, going up.
do you think it's the same set of skills to be a leader to be in a leadership role than to be a keeper?
I think there's some people that need to work on certain things. Overall, can be really great at communicating with our animals. We practice it constantly. We practice positive reinforcement. We practice clear communication with our animals because obviously we don't speak the same language, but we're not super great at doing it with our animals, or with each other. Like the people who are really good at being leaders are the ones that practice it with people as much as they do with the animals. And I think there's sometimes people in leadership that haven't quite figured that out yet. Where that you can be a leader, but you can be a boss, but you can't be a leader. Like if you can't communicate what needs to be done, or what the vision is, or how do you get people to follow you if you can't communicate what it is you need, or what it is you want, or whether it's you the individual or you the organization.
I think, like, from my perspective, the fact that overall this industry does kind of put in the heads, and maybe it's not just our industry, maybe it's kind of everywhere, you get the entry-level job, and then you get the more experienced job, and then you get the next experienced job, and then you should be promoted, right? Mm-hmm. Like leader is the next thing.
Right.
And I think that's the problem, right? Because to me, I feel like the motivation to be a leader is very different than what motivates me to be a good keeper, right? Like, and for me, I saw that shift change while I was in a leadership role, just luckily. Like, I just thought leadership was the next step, the next thing to do, the next box to check. But then when I started realizing that I got more excited when someone else succeeded, and I wanted to see that more and do that more and figure out how I could communicate better so that we saw that more, as opposed to like getting really stoked when I was successful. Like that was when I was like, oh, maybe this maybe this is for me. And I've seen lots of leaders in my history who don't ever seem to get excited when someone else succeeds. So,
Right.
I definitely, I think that's something that we need to pound into the heads of the kids coming up, is like, how else can you grow in your career without just becoming, or moving into leadership?
Right. Because I think it's really important. And I work with people, and I've known people who say, I am not a leader, in that sense. Like my next step is not to be in leadership. And I think that's extremely important, for those that you find that in yourself too, to be like, nope, that is not the next step for me. But they do, and they should have a next step. There needs to be an acknowledgement, like that, okay, well, you haven't stopped, you're still
Right.
growing, you're still doing stuff, like, you still deserve a next step. Like, it doesn't, it's not leadership or retirement, like,
Right.
you don't like, we don't have a pasture to put you in, like,
You're done.
Yeah,
Sorry.
sorry.
Know all there is to know. Well,
Right.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, no, I think that's the problem. I think that's where it's okay. We just find the person who's been the best keeper, and then we make them the leader. And you're like,
Yeah.
just because they know how to put everything together with a zip tie does not a leader make.
Exactly. So before we got on here, you were talking a little bit about the difference between primaries and on-call float keepers at your facility. We call them on-demand keepers at mine, when you can move around and go to different places. But float and primaries, because I think that's a great example of one way that you can grow both ways. Like, you can either become like a species specialist, or you could become a jack of all, learn different species, right? The other thing that you talked about was kind of how they do a 6-month check-in. So would you talk a little bit about that system as vaguely as possible?
I know, and some of it is, I think I'm super new, so everything is like super exciting for me. Everybody else is like, oh, it's time for this, and I'm like, oh, this is so exciting. I think they're still like, oh, look how excited she is, we're doing something right. And I'm just like, this is great. So we have and like you said, you have something similar, and I think most facilities have something similar, because a couple of the places I've worked, has done the same thing, where you have people who focus on one area, and then the people who can kind of fill in around the facility as well. And I think it's really important to have both. When you have people who are species specific, it allows that greater focus on animal behavior, and like not just the individual behavior, but the natural behavior of the species. It allows greater focus on enrichment types. It allows the greater focus on training certain behaviors, the more difficult, complex behaviors. And it increases just the welfare of the animals. It's what we all focus on and strive for, and it allows that greater focus. And I mean, for us, we do a lot of the training of people, like our new hires, and can really tell them what they need to look for, and whether or not they're going to eventually become a primary or become a float, they still have kind of that baseline knowledge. And so our floats, we have a couple people, and I've worked with a couple of them in my career, and they blow my mind every time. And it's people who know all the routes, where they know almost everything, and how to work every route in the zoo. And I could never do it. It's not something that I've ever been able to do. When I was cross-trained at my previous facility, I had 2 areas, and that was it. And I was like, maybe I could take one more that doesn't have a lot going on.
Yeah.
Because my brain I can't handle it. Like, it's not, I just don't have that capacity, because I'm such like a primary focusy type person that I just can't look at it, at a higher level. I'm going to look at it in that more, detailed approach. And like, I know my friend's goal is to learn every barn on our entire route, and she's one barn away, and it's driving her nuts that she can't, you know, we haven't had enough opportunities to train her on that one barn yet. And she's like, I just need to do it. I just need to do it. And she's
like
good at it.
Pokemon.
Yeah. It's like we need to make her like a sash, you know, like in Girl Scouts with like the different badges.
Yeah.
And I was just like, and she's like, yeah, and she can rattle off. I mean, she is diligent. She reads the daily reports every day from every barn. And I mean, you can ask her about every animal and she just will rattle off what's going on in every barn. I mean, she can still keep it all straight. And I'm just like, I could barely keep, like, you know, my 2 barns straight. And that's my primary area. And I'm like, I don't know how you do it. And I think having people like that, and a lot of our floats are phenomenal at this. It allows the primaries, they say, to focus on primary things. You know, the more in depth, like we have to do more paperwork, or, you know, dealing with medication refills, and, you know, sussing out like who we have to contact for those refills, or following up on something that happened yesterday, or work orders, or the things, you know, the things that the floats don't have to worry about because they're maybe in this barn today, but not tomorrow. You know, they're looking at it at the higher level and not that in-depth level. So it frees up a little bit more of our time. And it's crazy. But we also have kind of like a check-in process at around 6 months. And it's seeing if floats still want to float, or if or the primaries want to switch or into floats, or the other way around, to see how we're doing. I mean, it can be a lot. There's some floats that I work with that used to be primaries, and the other way around. And sometimes your combination of the people you're primaries with just isn't a good combination. So, because you have to work in a team, and sometimes part of your primary, and some of your primary team, like people have things going on at that time, and it's just not a good combination. And you're like, wait a minute, I'll come back to this, or I have things going on, and you know, you just need to kind of like redo, which that kind of check-in and that not constant asking of how are you doing, but this is one of the few places I've worked where how are you doing, they actually want to know how am I doing. Like, you know, it's not just
the question you ask when you walk by someone and you're like already all the way by, and you're like, oh, good, I'm glad you're great, because I wasn't going to stop to hear your answer.
Yeah, right. Oh, you're still breathing, good.
That's all you need.
Yeah.
Okay, I have one more question for you, and then we're going to wrap it up. I've mitigated the dog situation there. Maybe, I don't know. Now they're coming in here, so it could be a wrestling match in the office. I think probably one of the hardest things that you've done, maybe multiple times in your career, but most recently, is leaving one place and going somewhere else. And you have a lot of experience. So you have, I think I counted over 20 years of experience before, or at least close, before you came to Dallas.
Started as a wee small child.
Yes. Okay. So, yes, you're not 80. I mean,
no.
But anyway, you have quite a few years of experience. You're coming into a new place. Like, did they automatically just respect you and all your experience and want to hear everything you believed and thought and knew, or how did you play that?
So in some ways I got really lucky. So they were looking at kind of making some changes to the program. They did want to increase the amount of training and enrichment in this specific area, which is something that I focus on, you know, personally. That's some of my favorite things. I know that's some of my favorite things. I mean, nobody ever says picking up poop is their favorite thing, but you know, I also do enjoy a good power washing of a pool, but so I kind of knew that coming in. I knew that was going to be hard. You know, I mean, enacting any kind of change is hard. you know, especially coming in as the new person being like, okay, I don't know what you're doing, but this is what I got to do now here. So it was a lot of, I told myself going in that the first month I was going to not be quiet, but like keep my mouth shut, essentially, you know, and I wanted to look and watch and learn and observe and see, you know, how much of it is the perceived, I would say, observations from management that's 2 levels above, you know, who doesn't work in the area every day,
Right.
versus what is actually happening in the area every day. Because as much as I love my associate curators, I think they're wonderful people, but sometimes, you know,
we don't know.
No, I love you guys, but you know, there's a difference between people who are in the area every day and what the non-area people see.
Absolutely.
So I wanted to see, you know, what the actual day-to-day looks like. Where can changes be made? Are they big changes? Are they small changes? Like, where can, you know, are there efficiency issues? Are there not efficiency issues? You know, like, are we walking back and forth 35 times where we could actually walk back and forth 10 times? Like, you know, I don't know who would ever recommend anything like that.
Yeah, that sounds like a spaghetti map to me. Very excited.
So, I mean, just kind of telling myself, I know, especially because I get really excited when I can see places where things can be fixed.
Yeah.
That I was like, okay, I'm going to simmer down and be quiet. And of course, anytime you meet a new keeper, it's, where have you worked? What have you done? You know, and so went through and I said, oh, I've done this and this and this. And like you said, you know, you kind of added up the math and it was, wow, you've got a lot of experience. And I went, yes, yes, I do. And I mean, a lot of my coworkers realized that I wasn't a typical, you know, I wasn't kind of like the typical new hire. They had a bunch of new hires who came in who really didn't have experience. So the other primaries who were there at the time went, I bet you're going to be the new, they were missing a primary. So it was, I bet you're going to be our other primary. I'm really excited that you're here. I can't wait. Like, awesome. And holy cow, you've got a lot of experience. So there was a lot of respect from kind of my peers, and then a lot of picking of my brain, which was really exciting. And now that I've been there and can kind of, I want to say back up, like, you know, it's walk the walk, talk the talk, but being able to back it up with, this is why this would be a better practice. It's been some slow and better changes. And so we are training a little bit more, enrichment's training around, turning around a little bit more and getting a little more creative.
Yeah, that's awesome.
It's so exciting.
I'm sure in your experience, you've also seen that done really poorly. So that probably helped, you know, where, I mean, I think we're all just excited to come in and contribute what we know and what we, you know, what we were hired for, why they picked us for the job. And sometimes we forget to learn about respect or take the time to earn the opportunity to share.
Right. And I know, you know, I was like, well, I know at the toned down level, it's still going to come across, you know, like big, but I'm like, I hope it didn't come across as like, that's like a giant tsunami.
Well, next week I'll be interviewing one of your coworkers to find out. So.
Oh, okay, good.
Just kidding. I mean, unless of course they want to, but.
Oh, probably.
Yeah.
Oh, they'll tell you all about how horrible I am, I'm sure.
Yeah, bring it on. Let's counteract. Okay, well, you know what she said. No. Wrong.
Yeah. Right.
No, that's awesome. I mean, like, I know there are 1,000 other questions that I could ask you, but I also talked to you at the beginning about how TikTok is pulling everyone away. And so we've been talking for like 27 minutes now. Oh, wow. And I know that maybe no one's watching anymore. So if you are watching, please say I made it to the end. Michelle, I expect to hear from you. And if you didn't make it, that's okay. But maybe we can do it again, talk about some other specific stuff. I just really appreciate you. Glad that you are in my life and that you didn't decide to leave the industry. That's a big thing for me. Like the whole reason why I started Animals Amplified was to keep good people from leaving the industry, because it's still a job and it's still work. And I think when we're animal people, we get into here thinking like, I'm going to get to play with animals all day. It's going to be glorious. There's never going to be any problems. Right? So, what's your last parting advice to someone out there who's watching?
Don't get discouraged. And it's hard. It is. It's a difficult field, but do your research and don't get discouraged. There's way more resources now out there.
Yes.
Obviously than when I started. I had to look up things in a book.
Yeah,
it's crazy.
There were probably dinosaurs then.
I think they delivered the books.
Oh, perfect. Okay.
So it's hard. Like you said, people are leaving the field, it's crazy. And if that's the right decision for you, then it is, and I won't question it, because I have a lot of really good friends who have left, and I understand all of their decisions.
Yep.
And none of them were made lightly. So reach out. All of us are more than happy to talk about our paths and everything. So
and that's a great plug, because if anybody is sitting, maybe you're a new keeper going, wow, I'm hearing a lot of this negativity, or I'd be happy to match you up with both people who decided it was for them and decided it wasn't for them. If you want to talk to me directly, I will almost never say I think you need to quit, because that's literally against everything I stand for. I will do everything to help you own what's within your circle of influence and improve things. But even in like the worst situations, it doesn't mean I condone them. It just means I'm trying to give you your power back. But so if you want non-biased advice on whether or not you should quit, you're not coming to me. But I will find someone that you can talk to.
right.
All right. Well, thank you guys so much for listening today, at least to half of it. And maybe if you didn't make it through, you'll come back later. Again, Janine, thank you so much for your time. Zookeeper days off are very important for namaste and relaxation. So I appreciate you giving some of your day off to me. I miss your face. And thank you guys. So stay tuned for the next So You Want to Be